your book, it really has like, this was actually one of the hardest ones for me to do, because sometimes the books that we read, they sort of, they just cover one topic, but you've got so many and so many broad topics in that book. But one of the things that we've probably never really spoke about at the book club was like a just culture and a restorative culture. So I know that that is a massive, massive topic. But I was just wondering again, how can we set up the conditions to start enabling a just culture or restorative culture?
Hands up who's got a just culture policy in their business. Okay, those who have, is it algorithm based? So you follow a flow chart that says do this, do that. In the event of so-and-so, did they mean this? And shout out, yeah, okay, so 2 out of 3. Okay, anybody else who's thinking about putting a just culture process in place, don't. Because it, seriously, it's a just culture algorithm is primarily there for an organization to protect itself. It's there as a, hey, look, we're going to look out for the workers because this is what we do. But actually, the best way you can do about, you can understand being just or having justness is about creating the environment to tell stories, context-rich stories, and understand that inside an organization, as long as you don't hit a regulatory or legal criminal framework, you can do a lot of learning inside your organization. But as soon as you step over the regulatory, legal, criminal piece, all bets are off when it comes to learning, unfortunately, because the organization has to protect itself. They're not going to throw itself under the bus to protect an individual. So what I would say is really what we want to do is create a learning culture within the organization, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve. So, you talk about the restorative culture, just culture of who's been hurt, what do they need, and whose job is it, or whose obligation is it to respond to that. If you're inside an organization, that's the leadership piece, and they've got to understand that. Once you start telling context-rich stories, warts and all, conflicts, workarounds, adaptations, actually the justness arrives. And my experience and the research that I've been doing is that actually once you start telling a context-rich story, all of the blame, all of the attacking stops, because now you put them in your shoes and your rationality, and you understand all of that stuff. If we don't have that culture that supports the learning, what happens is we have half-truths. We didn't tell a lie, we just didn't tell everything. We hide stuff, we only write down what we have to write down. And the problem is then the analysis is incomplete, and so we write more rules. And you turn around and say, hang on a minute, you've got 10 rules. They didn't follow those 10, somebody got injured. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put 3 rules on top of that 10. So now we've got 13 rules to follow. Of course they'll follow them all. No, they won't. You've got to look at the context of what's driving people, influencing people to behave the way they did. And you can only do that by creating that storytelling that's there. And that starts with the leadership. And so my view of psychological safety and just culture is psychological safety is perspective. You create the environment that allows the latent failures, the hidden things to be unearthed, because somebody's going to come around and say, you know what, this sucks. It doesn't work. Somebody's going to get hurt. And that leadership role goes, thank you. I've heard that. We want a challenger safety. We want a challenger community, but you have to congratulate that and you have to do something with it. When something bad happens and it's not a very serious outcome, then actually, as in the sort of legal, criminal, legislative space, you can then look back and say, how does it make sense? Tell those stories. But you don't have to have an accident or a really bad event to create learning. You can just stop time, and we've got learning reviews, learning teams as well, as ways to basically say, how does it make sense for somebody to do what they do? You can't, for those 2 at the back who've got the processes, normally what happens in organizations, accident happens, go through the investigation, we get the report, get the just culture policy off the wall, brush it off, right, we've now got this report, how do we deal with this individual? And that report that you've got is a synthesis through the lens of the investigator And if that investigator's looking for non-compliance, the report in front of you will be framed around non-compliance. So now you go through the flow diagram, ding, 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 right, march in the guilty so-and-so, that's it, they're out. So it's about creating that learning culture, not a just culture. Just culture is just an enabler, but actually it's often used too late.
Yeah, I think but Sidney Dekker talks about just culture being, oh, we just fired them, we just got rid of them. So that's like, yeah, I've heard him say that before.